What's up, guys? All right, so we're gonna do a slightly different format today. Of course, it doesn't seem very different right now. Also, I should start off the video actually by apologizing for my voice and possible complications from that. One of the kids brought something home from school, some kind of cold, which is standard parent-child procedure. But I just like to let you guys know up front that I will be struggling for the duration of the video. Anyway, things I want to get into in this video. I want to review MLA. I believe that was on the syllabus. I'm gonna call a bit of an audible on that. I'm gonna talk about something related to MLA, but then I'm gonna use what we're doing next time to review it. I think that'll be good to do once you have drafts anyway, which is your homework. So moving that a little bit forward, kicking that down the line. We're gonna do a workshop video today here in a moment. It's gonna be a little bit different. More on that in a second. What I want to start the video with actually though is just kind of a really quick description of why I do anything the way that I do it, because I'm hoping that'll make the rest of this video make a little more sense. Basically, at least 75% of my process as a teacher is me thinking about things I wish I had known when I was a student. I was a student for a very long time in college. That just kind of goes with the territory of becoming a professor. Sorry. And as a result of that, I can still remember being in my comp classes when I was a freshman and having no real idea of what was going on. And actually, in some ways, there were things I was doing correctly or doing well. I didn't know that either. And to my teacher's defense, she had no reason to think I didn't know those things. You know what I mean? Like, so all that is to say, what we're going to do today is going to feel a little bit different when we get there. You'll see. But basically, this entire video is going to be devoted to trying to give you guys an insight into how I grade your papers. Okay. I know that's a real question all of you have, but it can be really hard for you to phrase it in the way that you mean it, and it can also be really hard for me to interpret that. So I have sort of two things we're going to do, a kind of general approach to grading papers, which I'm going to do here in like 20 seconds, and then a more local approach, which I'll show you sort of in the next part of this. All right, to begin with, if you want to look at the document I'm looking at as we go over this, I have pulled up our rubric for our first paper. You can access it on Courseden. It's been there the whole time. It's under the prompt in section 1, right? It's called rubric 1. I have it pulled up on an iPad, so I'm just going to refer to it. But again, this is the rubric I use to grade your first papers. So the first thing you could do, if you are curious, you could look over it. That would help. But rather than just sort of review the language here, which again, you can read, so you could do that. You don't need me for that. What I like to do here is sort of translate what's on the rubric, sort of dumb down what's on the rubric, give you some things to watch for, I guess. So another way to phrase that, this is not to say necessarily that this is an exhaustive description of the rubric. Again, that's what the rubric is for. But some key areas, some like do your best to concentrate on these, not screw these up, that sort of thing. Okay. I'm going to start at the very bottom of the rubric in describing it, and that's because it just gets more complicated when you get near the top. That's how it's been built for some reason. We don't make these rubrics. Okay. At the very bottom, format and basic requirements is really just what it says. But again, I can boil it down to two things: MLA and requirements. What does that even mean? Well, MLA, again, we're going to review this more in depth next time. That's your double space, Times New Roman, different headers, works cited page, which I want you to attempt this time. I'm not actually going to be a stickler for that, but I do want you to try it. Citations, so the parentheticals, all that stuff goes into that 10% on the rubric. Requirements, the paper length this time, I'm using my memory, but I believe it's 2 to 3 pages, I believe. By the way, 2 pages is at the bottom of the second page. You guys get really cute with that. If you get to the top of the second page, that is one page, you know. Anyway, so MLA and requirements, that's that 10%. I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory, but that's where we start. The next one, also super self-explanatory, style, syntax, and grammar. That one is your writing. It's 20% of your grade, so it's significant. For just a second, I thought about breaking all those down for you, and I can't imagine you'd want that to happen. Grammatical concerns, I would hope you know what that means, but spelling, punctuation, capitalization, things like this, do your best, right? Style, though, and syntax, that really just encapsulates like how well is it written. And that is to say, like, awkward constructions, unnecessary language, baggy language. This is stuff that you kind of figure out as the semester goes along. It's unfortunately not the sort of skill you can really crush just a couple weeks into the semester. But that said, you want to do your best here. I always recommend students read over their work before turning it in, at least when it comes to like a paper, you know. And there's different approaches you can take to that, which I'm not going to go over here. But as I always say, if anybody has further questions about any of this stuff, you can always hit me up. Some of you do already, and we can talk about it. But anyway, the next, we're scrolling up, organization and development. This really comes down to two things. Paragraphs, and by that I mean, well, I guess first of all, you need paragraphs. Some of you are crazy. Some of you just don't use paragraphs. I've never quite been able to understand why, but that's a good first step. Paragraphs, have them. To be more specific, introduction paragraph, body paragraphs, conclusion. Every semester I have students who take conclusions way too seriously, and they occasionally even get a little bit upset that I don't go over conclusions. You need a conclusion. You need to try one, okay? But it's the sort of concern, honestly, if I'm ever talking to you guys as a class about conclusions, like in an extended way, that's a really good sign, because conclusions barely matter. I would even go so far as to say they almost don't matter. You do need them, but yeah, your introduction, your body paragraphs matter way more. Concentrate on those. And then at the end, try a conclusion. Beyond that, topic sentences. We've talked about this a couple times already. In my experience, you guys, especially in 1101, I'd say at least half the time, just don't even attempt those. Try them. Honestly, even an attempt can make a world of difference. Even if it's wrong, which it can be, especially on the first paper in your first college writing class, right? But try to begin every body paragraph with a topic sentence. And if nothing else, review these requirements, right? Like, I know I have at least a couple videos where we talk about body paragraphs and how to build them. We have a couple videos now where we talk about introductions and how to build them. If you're wrong in the attempt, that's one thing. But if you just don't try certain elements, that's worse, right? Okay. Last two, response/thesis. Your thesis? Yeah. Beyond that, your overall argument, your argumentation in the paper. So it actually kind of ties into, like, it's kind of interconnected to summary and critical reading. And by the way, in that section, I want to focus on critical reading. You will occasionally need to summarize in this paper because you got to talk about a text, right? But as I've pointed out, I think numerous times to this point, you summarize where you need a little bit of information, a little bit of context. Beyond that, the bulk of your time should be spent in critical reading, which is to say, how are you using your evidence, your specific textual evidence? This can be quotations, this can be, in some case, paraphrase because we're looking at a documentary, you know, a film. But how are you using that stuff, not just citing it, but how are you using it to explain your ideas, to prove your arguments? And this, of course, is how it ties into response thesis, right? I hope that makes sense. I hope that clarifies some things. Obviously, if you look at the percentages on the rubric, the closer to the top of the rubric you get, the more that stuff is worth. And of course, that makes sense. Those top two categories are all about your argument and how you build it, how you prove it, how you structure it. That's half your grade. Your argument is half your grade. That's how it's going to be your whole writing career in college, okay? So argument matters. Everything after that is still important, but organization is 20%. Your writing itself is 20%. And again, you just do your best there, okay? We're going to keep working on it. And then the requirements is 10%. And I want to end on a quick note about that section. It's only 10% of your grade, but people will lose points here, man. And I'm just like, of all the sections to lose points on, for instance, your writing section, you are the kind of writer you've always been. Ideally, you'll get a bit better as the semester goes, but that's a skill. That takes time. It's not usually the sort of thing you can just flip a switch and just be way better, okay? Format and requirements, MLA, page length, having a works cited, like these are things you can just do and people won't do it. Like I'm saying this to you right now. Hopefully it's not you, but at least a handful of your classmates will not do all the requirements, or they will really flub the formatting to the point where, you know, they'll lose 2 points or 4 points on this section. But those are a couple points you can just have, right? Like it kind of kills me when students lose points on this section because it's just, they're free points. They really are. Take a couple minutes is my recommendation here. Take a couple minutes before you turn in your paper as a part of your process. Review your writing, obviously, make it the best you can. Check the requirements, man. Is it as long as it needs to be? Is it in MLA? If I'm not sure, Google's a thing. Also, I should remind you guys, there's an MLA template on Coursden in the helpful documents section. Or again, you can just Google MLA template. Like it's 2022, there are ways to make this happen. None of them are super complicated. I'm just saying, there's 10 points on the rubric there for you. You can just get them, right? So do that. All right, for this next part of the video, as I said, we're gonna try something a little bit different. I understand screen cap is very boring. I don't love it either. To that end, we're kind of gonna do a screen cap. We're gonna do it in an analog fashion, which is to say, I'm gonna guide you through some marginalia I've written on a student's work. Of course, this is a classmate of ours, anonymous, all that stuff. But basically what I want to bring to your attention, first of all, there's a document below this video. So if you have not already, go ahead and read over that. It won't take you more than a second. This is an introduction from one of our most recent homework assignments. And she does a lot of good things, which is cool. But she has a couple things we need to talk about. So if you have not, go ahead and read that. Pause here, read it as you get a look at my kitchen and my boys' play kitchen. All right, so what are we looking at, right? Check it out. I was kind of sparse with my marginalia because I didn't want to overcomplicate it, but I wanted to highlight a couple things for you guys. First of all, parts of an introduction. The good news is we have all of them. We got a hook right here at the top. You know that feeling of pure fear, pretty strong hook. I don't mind it so much, but okay. We introduce the text, social dilemma. I wouldn't mind having the director's name. That's a good idea. Let's go ahead and drop that in there. Roadmap. We got one. There's a couple issues with it, but we got one. We'll get to the issues here in a moment. And then below that, we have a thesis. So we have the parts. Now, as I mentioned in the I guess part one of this video, attempting the parts is half the battle, and we've done that, so well done. Now we're going to talk about how to maybe shine them up a little bit, all right? The hook, it's optional. I mean, this one's fine, I suppose. I don't mind it. So anyway, let's move to the important stuff. Introducing the text. First of all, documentary. It's a film, it's a long work, needs to be italicized, not inside quotation marks. The rule is, if it's a shorter work, so poems, song titles, titles of episodes, things like this, those go inside quotation marks, okay? If it's a longer work, a novel, a collection of poems, a show as opposed to an episode, an album as opposed to a song, right? Things like that, you italicize those. So the Social Dilemma needs to be in italics. I feel like a lot of you are gonna do that. What do we do here? And again, I know I'm kind of hand camming this, and I apologize about that. If you'd rather follow some of this by looking at the document that I've included, I would not blame you. Anyway, when we're looking at the introduction to the text, I already mentioned I'd like to have the director's name, so we'd fix that. In the Social Dilemma, this very topic, which they're alluding to their hook there, is brought up by people who know technology from the inside out. They want a comma here to highlight that. That's a fragment there. Experts who have knowledge on social media and different technology platforms. They voice their very concerns on certain subjects. We'll talk about that phrasing with technology and go in depth on how technology is advancing. All of that is their introduction to the text. I think it's got to be a little bit quicker. It's kind of long. I mean, I'll tell you this, it's as long as it can be. No longer than that. We need to get into the roadmap. Apart from the comma issue, and you make experts who have knowledge a part of the sentence previous to that. The phrasing issue here, they voice their very concerns on certain subjects. What does that mean? My note here is that that's vague. What are their very concerns? What are these certain subjects? We get more specific immediately afterward. Technology, they really go in depth, not into depth, on how So sometimes, most of the time, honestly, when you guys are vague like this, it's because you have an idea of what you want to say, just sort of clanging around in your head, right? But you have no idea how to say it. So you take a shot, which is what we've done here in the first half of the sentence. And then your brain goes, it's not good enough. And this is subconscious, okay? In the second half, that's what the student meant to say. So how about, one easy fix would be, they talk about technology and go in depth on how it's advancing. Anything like that. Like it says the same thing. We cut out that vague language. You get it. In this next part, we have an unfortunate period here. I think that's just a mistake, but again, you want to look for stuff like that. That should be an easy catch. Sorry, I'm moving around a lot. All right. So we have a couple small errors. You want to capitalize Instagram. You want to leave yourself out. I really believe, this is going to sound harsh, I don't care what you believe, right? And I say it that way because I want it to stick. Leave yourself out. It leads to unnecessary language. It also makes you sound subjective when we're aiming at objectivity as best we can. So just cut, and look, most of the time when it's an I and then sort of the accompanying verb, in this case believe, you can just cut that. The rest of the sentence works fine. The audience of this film is able to connect with the feelings of this young girl, blah, blah. See, like it reads fine. So cut that stuff. The sentence itself is probably okay for the most part afterward. And what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about what we need to be talking about in this paper, which is the audience and how they react to the film, how it works on them rhetorically, right? And we're getting pretty specific. Now, there's going to be an issue with specificity here in a moment, but for right now, this is the mode we want to be operating in when it comes to our roadmap. We're talking about the audience. They connect with this young girl because they share a similar experience with haters, right? And we're also sympathetic toward her. Now, I kind of feel like we have to say why. I guess we're implying it with the bullies and the haters, so maybe that's okay. Anyway, sorry, I got to adjust my hand here. This next part, I have it bracketed off, and I have it bracketed here at the end too, so I'll get it on the screen for you. All of that, read over that real quick. And again, you can use the included document if you want. That is too specific for an introduction, mostly because it's got a direct quotation right there in the middle. I'm not going to tell you you can't ever quote in an introduction, but most of the time, this time included, look at that quotation. There are all these services on the internet that we think of as free, but they're not free. They're paid for by advertisers. And then they kind of go into, Well, actually, I mean, they don't, which is the problem. But that's a great quotation. You know where that would really work well? A body paragraph. Why is that though? The issue with dropping it into the middle of this introduction, look, we have our hook, introduce text, we start a roadmap, and then we get this very, very specific information right in the middle. The problem is that is so specific, it warrants more discussion. I want to know sort of how that affects the audience. Oh, that's my wife's cuckoo clock. How that affects the audience, talking about advertisers, talking about sort of the machinations behind social media and how it really works, right? How does that affect us when we're watching the movie? The problem when you drop it into an intro like this, you don't have the space, right? So we take all that out, everything within those brackets, we move it down. Look at that. It's part of a body paragraph. We have our evidence for a body paragraph for later. Outstanding. The rest of this, all right. So we get back into Isla. We very much want to talk. Oh, and by the way, if that's going to be a body paragraph, of course, we want to probably talk about it in our roadmap, but just not in this way, not with this level of specificity, right? Anyway, we get back into Isla, so we very much want to talk about her. And again, I get that. She has some of the more probably powerful scenes in the movie, right? Personally, I feel like Benji's a little bit of an idiot, so that makes him harder to connect with, at least to me. But Isla, she's a young girl. It's not her fault. She's super innocent, right? And I think that's moving in a way that we can talk about. And they want to. They're talking about the bathroom scene with her and how she's having to deal with, again, just all this vitriol from the internet. Now, some issues here. One, I want to highlight, because you all do this, that's a possessive. The author's point, just a little apostrophe there, please. After this, the author's point across even wider, we're broadening. When you're broadening something, you don't need to make it even wider. That's what broaden does. You want to look for verbs and think about what they give you for free. Below that, by showing the effects that technology can have even when it's not present. Oh, that second. Cut that second. That's what present means. If it's not there, it's not there that second. It's not there the second after that, right? Cut that stuff. We got another I here. I believe with the voice they made. I'm not quite sure what that voice is they're talking about, but again, I believe. We can just cut all that. Look at the rest of the sentence. By picking a young girl to portray a member of the younger generation, they really build on emotions as we witnessed, right? Like it all works fine. So in this particular case, a lot of you will do this. If you're starting your sentences with I especially, 9 times out of 10, I'll tell you, you can just cut the first little bit and you can find a spot in your sentence where the rest of the sentence picks up and it's fine and you're doing what you need to do and you're good to go, right? So that's all good. The thesis, we get a little bit redundant here. We say along with the feeling of emotions. I mean, how else do emotions work? You know what I'm saying? So along with the emotions they used based off this young girl, the film also uses medical credibility. I have a question mark there, more on that in a second. And the fact that this girl who's portrayed, we could probably cut who's portrayed. I mean, we know she's in the movie, right? And the fact that this girl happens to be very relatable to many of the audience to many of the viewers. Again, what other kind of audience are you gonna have to a movie? Because we all have struggled with self-esteem. It's a decent thesis. I mean, we gotta clean up some of the language here. That'll probably give us more room to expand upon it, I think. But the big question I have here at the end, medical credibility. We didn't talk about that at all. I mean, maybe we kind of imply it here. We're talking about experts, but that needs to be part of the roadmap, okay? And or, I mean, what can also happen, maybe they end up actually not talking about that. Sometimes you guys write a thesis early and you surprise yourselves and the argument changes. In that case, well, that guy needs to go, right? Any of that is okay, but this is part of the revision process. You gotta sort of train yourselves to be able to step back and assess what you actually have. Right now, we don't talk about that at all. So one of two things needs to happen there. And also we could probably expand our thesis a bit, but we'll talk about that more in depth next time. All right, guys. One more quick thing to talk about. I'm trying to keep this video right around half an hour. We'll see how I do. titles. Some of you may be of the opinion, and I would totally understand why, that titles are at best ancillary to all the other concerns we have. This is true. Very fancy word, by the way. Look it up. Anyway, it's not like you're going to lose points on a title, okay? But they can actually be super useful, not just when it comes to whoever's reading your paper, in this case me, but in some ways they can actually help you guys as writers, and here's how. So number one, first of all, I always like to start with the bare minimum. The title I most often get on papers is rough draft, which of course is funny because it's not your rough draft. Beyond that, people will also title their paper the same thing as whatever text we're reading. Don't do that. That title's taken. So in this case, The Social Dilemma, that's the name of the documentary. That's not the name of your paper. So throw all those away. Bare minimum, you could do, what is the paper? What is the assignment? What are we doing? A rhetorical analysis of the social dilemma, you know. Am I in love with that title? No. Is it better than nothing? Yeah. And sometimes that's where we got to start. Start with better than nothing. Beyond that, though, what I want to talk to you for just a couple minutes about here. Looking back at the document that you hopefully still have in front of you, I just hand cam my way through. Apologies for that. You know, I'm trying new things. A title tells you what a thing is about, right? Sometimes you can get super creative with this, and that can, you know, work out, or it can get you into trouble because it doesn't make any sense. But for a paper, most of the time, a title, the way I think of it is, if you took your thesis and you boiled it down even further to where it's not even a sentence now, it's just, you know, 5 words, give or take. It kind of helps your reader know what they're in for, but the way I'm going to talk to you about it is, it actually helps you think about, what am I actually focused on? Because even when it comes to a thesis, you know, there's statements, not sentences. The document we're looking at, it's 1 sentence. Really, I'm recommending right now at least another sentence where we get a little more in depth with how some of those ideas work, rhetorically, upon the audience, all that stuff. So that is to say, that's a lot of words, and even that can sometimes be hard to manage, be hard to hang on to up here, right? But if you can look over your thesis statement for 5 minutes and find a way to really sum it up in, again, 5-ish words, all of a sudden you have a nice little lighthouse, if you'll excuse the metaphor, but you have a nice little lighthouse that you can carry with you throughout the paper as a writer. Now you can go and look at the body of your paper with that title in mind and say, well, does this body paragraph, where I'm getting super in depth about whatever, make any sense as part of what that title says my paper is about? If it does, awesome. If not, which happens, well, again, you have one of two things you got to do. Either, number one, your title's not quite right, you know, or, unfortunately, maybe your body paragraph, at least as it is in your paper, doesn't quite work for whatever your overall argument is. That happens too. And look, again, is that a good day for you? No, but I am telling you, finding that stuff out, as much of a bummer as it can be, it's better to do that before you turn the paper in, right? So this is how a title can help you. To take it back to our example, in the case of this paper, I'm just going to read the thesis at you real quick, if I can. Along with the emotions they used from this young girl, the film also uses medical credibility, the fact that this girl happens to be very relatable, and because we have all struggled with self-esteem. So what are some of the bigger points they hit in that thesis? We're very concerned with Isla, first of all, and especially looking at the roadmap. That's damn near all we want to talk about, really. So we got to mention her, or the fact that she's a young girl, or the fact that she's relatable. Most of the scenes with her in them are somehow concerned with self-esteem. Okay. Could we think about how to make that into a title, right? And some parts of this process are just kind of throwing things against a wall. You see what sticks. I mean, you know, the analysis of a young girl and her struggles with self-esteem in The Social Dilemma. You know, kind of wordy, but titles for papers often are. What does that do if that's our rough draft of a title? I got to remember it. The analysis of a young girl and her struggles with self-esteem in The Social Dilemma. Well, number one, it tells us from the jump what we're looking at, which is the social dilemma. But number two, it also tells us what we're looking at from the jump in terms of focus. We are very concerned with Isla and very concerned not just with self-esteem, but her struggles with it. Yeah, go back and look at the paragraph if you have to. Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at. And again, that helps me as a reader when it comes to your paper, but it helps you because now you have that title at the very top of your paper. You can go through everything else and just kind of have that in the back of your head. Like, does this make any sense? For example, the section we cut from their introduction where they're talking about advertisers and how that's really how social media is built. It's really just a giant commercial that we all participate in without thinking about it. Does that function in any way as part of this larger conversation about self-esteem, the damage that social media can kind of do to it? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, one idea would be, and again, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, you care about your self-esteem, or at least you should. I'll put it, you care more about your self-esteem than pretty much anybody else. Maybe your parents, you know, but that's it. You know who doesn't give a shit about you or how you feel about you, really? Advertisers, companies. They care that you feel some kind of a way to buy their stuff. That's it. That's all it ever is. So it's kind of interesting if we had a paragraph, for instance, about what the focus of this technology really is. And basically one upshot there is they're not interested in your self-esteem. If you feel good from social media, they don't care. If you feel bad, they don't care. What's the effect of that on the audience? You know, especially as a part of this larger conversation. Say we had two body paragraphs about Isla, because it seems like they want at least that many. About how this is kind of tearing her down and she's judging herself. Remember the scene with the mirror in the bathroom, all that stuff, and how emotional that is, and how I would hope anyway you'd be at least a little bit sympathetic toward her. Like, even if you can't relate, this is a young girl like dealing with awful stuff. Cool, I got that. You could easily talk about how that affects an audience, right? Rhetorically. But then we have this other paragraph where we're like talking about advertisers. I think you can make it work, right? It's just a question of, again, and this is why I come back to the title, thinking about what your paper is mostly about. And if there's any kind of a way, say you have an outlier paragraph like we're probably going to have from this Justin Rosenstein guy, can you make it work? Sometimes no. In this case, I think we could, but we were only able to do that by first sort of positing a title, putting it at the top of our paper, and then thinking through, you know, whether or not we could make it work. We can. I think we can. There's a super quick discussion of titles. It may come up again over the course of the semester, but I just like to give this little almost PSA for them. They are more valuable than you realize. Again, not just for me, but for you and your process as a writer. So I recommend giving them a shot. As far as homework, you have a rough drafts due for next time. That's on Turnitin.com. If you have not signed up already, you need to go do that. I sent you an email a while back. The subject line is Turnitin, one word, info. If you search for that in your Gmail, your Weska, right? My email should come up. Click that. It's got 2 pieces of information you need to sign up for Turnitin.com for our class. If you don't have an account on Turnitin.com, you'll first have to set up an account. As I mentioned before, some of you somehow someone has made you an account previously and you don't know about it. I don't know why people are doing that. If that's the case, when you go to log into turnitin.com, it will freak out and tell you that, you haven't, blah, 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 you already have an account. The easy fix for that is to just say forgot password. It'll send you a link to your email address. You can change your password, and all of a sudden you have an account. Those are the big hurdles that are sort of coming up. Again, you want to get your rough draft in. We're going to use that next time, and also it just helps the future you, so there's that. Otherwise, I hope everyone's well. I hope everyone is feeling better than I am right now. And yeah, that's all I got. Thanks.